In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 3 awesome plugins that you may not even know you have in Cakewalk by Bandlab. Hi folks, I'm Mike and I hope you're well. Now, Cakewalk by Bandlab is a fully featured DAW which comes with a whole bunch of plugins and cool things like the Pro channel. All of this for free. But there are 3 plugins which come with it which you may not even know you have. And I reckon 2 of them are some of the best plugins to come with any DAW. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to get access to those plugins and I'm going to be giving you a rundown of how to use them. But before we get into that, if you like this kind of content, all about DAWs, home recording, plugin reviews, gear reviews, that kind of thing, then please do subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you get to hear about my future videos. Now let's take a look at those hidden plugins. Okay, so here we are in an almost empty Cakewalk project, but it's not my regular copy of Cakewalk which I'm running. Instead, what I've done to demonstrate these things to you guys is I've actually installed what's called a virtual machine. It's kind of a fake PC, if you like, with Windows installed, a brand new fresh copy of Windows, and a brand new fresh copy of Cakewalk installed right away on that. So it's like an operating system with only Cakewalk on it, nothing else to corrupt it. And this is just to demonstrate to you guys that when you first install Cakewalk by Bandlab at the moment, there are 3 really awesome plugins which are not enabled, unfortunately. Now, I am talking in September 2019, so perhaps in the future these will be enabled and you can just almost disregard what I'm about to show you, but I will give you a demonstration of these 3 plugins, so you may want to watch that anyway. Anyhow, in this project we have one audio track set up here, and if I go to add effects here, you will see an awesome list of effects which come with Cakewalk, including a whole bunch of sonorous effects. What you won't find there, if these plugins are hidden, are the PX64 percussion strip, which is a really awesome percussion strip, the VX64 vocal strip, and the TL64 tube leveler. Now, all 3 of these are really good plugins, and it's really worth having them at your disposal. Now, you may think you don't have them, but you actually do. They're hidden, so I'm going to show you how to enable them in Cakewalk. So I'll just close this project off, and you can imagine that you've just loaded up Cakewalk for the first time here. I want you to go to the Utilities menu at the top here, and then under there, right at the bottom, you can see an option called Cakewalk Plugin Manager. So click on that, and that's going to bring up this little window here. Now, on the left-hand side, we have various different types of plugins in the plugin categories here. And if you flick through, you'll see the window in the middle there change to show the plugins which you currently have enabled, which is awesome. There's quite a few there. But there's some missing, as I say. Now, if you go down towards the bottom left of this UI here, you can change the option here from Show Enabled to Show Excluded. So I want you to click on Show Excluded. And now, if you go down through the various categories, you'll see that there are some excluded plugins in just some of the categories. So the main ones are in this VST audio effects category. Now, you're going to see 4 plugins here which are excluded. That's Boost 11, the PX64 percussion strip, the TL64 tube leveler, and the VX64 vocal strip. Now, I'm not going to ask you to enable Boost 11. It's already enabled, so I don't think you really need to enable that. I should say another version of it is already enabled. So what I'm going to get you to do is just click on each of these, holding down the Control key on your keyboard so you can select all 3 of them, and then you just need to click on Enable Plugins down here in the bottom left. So I'm clicking on Enable Plugins, and there they are. Now, if you go under the VST3 audio effects here, you will see Drum Replace is excluded. I'm not going to talk about that today, so I'm not going to enable it. I haven't fully tested it out to see if it works, so we won't be enabling that for now. Now, you can close that window. And then you can create a new project. So I'll go up to File, New, and simply create an empty project. Click on OK. And I'm then going to add
an audio track quickly. I'll expand that, and then when we go to effects and click on the plus icon there, go over to insert audio effects, and right down at the bottom you can see an uncategorized section there, and that has the 3 plugins which we're going to talk about in today's video. And I'm going to start off by talking about my favorite of the 3, which is the VX64 vocal strip. So in order to show you the VX64 vocal strip plugin, I've pulled up this little demo track here so that we can see how it works. Now, I just want to address this quickly because I've used this demo track before in previous videos, and some people have emailed me and messaged me about it to say, what song is this? Where can I get hold of it? Etc, etc. And I'm sorry to disappoint folks, but this is not a real song. It's just a few lines of vocal which my partner Susie sung a few months ago with a little bit of piano, and it never got any further, so it's not a real song. Maybe one day I'll finish it off and actually even give it a name. Perhaps you can suggest a name down in the comments. Now, as I say, it's very simple. It consists of just a piano part, a lead vocal, and a backing vocal. And it's on that lead vocal on this middle track here where I've applied the VX64 plugin. So I'll just click on that to bring it up. And it's a lovely looking interface, which I will go into in detail in a moment. But before I do that, let's just have a quick listen to a couple of the verses of the track so that you can get an idea of context. Now, do bear in mind that this vocal has nothing at all on it at the moment. It's completely dry.
You've taken my heart and you give it up. I'm trying to figure out how to fill your cup. Oh, that's what we do. You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the morning and you've gone away. That's what we do.
Okay, so you should get the gist of it there. So let's take a look at the plugin itself. I'll just bring it up a bit bigger here. Now, a vocal strip is just a bunch of sort of effects, if you like, and processors which are there for, especially for vocal tracks. They're sort of tailor-made for vocal tracks, and I think this is especially good. It starts off with saturation on the left-hand side over here, and in fact has a saturation control on the right-hand side as well for the output, so you can put it on the input or the output channels. It also has a de-esser, a compand, which is a combination of a compressor and expander, a tube equalizer, a doubler, and a delay. So let's run through each of these and see what they're all about. Starting off with the saturation on the input. I'm going to go to the beginning of the vocal here, and I'm going to solo the vocal. And I'm just going to push this saturation up so you can see if you can hear the effect.
You've taken my heart and you give it up. I'm trying to figure out how to fill your cup. Oh.
Now, if you can see me bypassing it, switching it off and on there, then you probably cannot hear too much of a difference. And I think the main reason for that is that the signal's not quite loud enough to really push that. So what I would do in this case is pop that back down again, increase the input signal here. I'm going to push it up by, say, 5 decibels or so. Now I want to counteract that on the right hand side just by pushing the output level down by 5 so that we're not just making the whole thing louder. And then I'll increase the saturation again. Have a listen again.
You've taken my heart and you give it up. I'm trying to figure out how to fill your cup. Oh.
Okay, there's probably a little bit too much there. If you can't hear much of a difference, don't worry about it too much. It is a subtle effect, and especially if you're new to kind of recording and mixing, it takes a little while for your ears to hear little details like that. But that's a saturation control, very easy to use and very subtle, I think. We'll switch it off for the moment because I don't want it there, and we'll move on to something you will be able to hear, and that's a de-esser. So we use a de-esser to get rid of sibilance in vocal. That's things like this sound or the t sound. Those are very uncomfortable things to listen to, especially if they're too loud in the mix or they're just too harsh. So we almost always want to get rid of them. Now, this particular de-esser, like a lot, has very few controls. We simply have a control to select the frequency. So that's the frequency which we're going to reduce. So we can just sweep through there as we're listening to hear that. And then we have a depth control which controls how much we're going to reduce that particular frequency. Now, what's really interesting is we actually have this listen control here. If we listen to the vocal first of all with that listen switched off.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay.
Okay, so you can hear a couple of S sounds in there, which we sort of want to get rid of. What we can do is we can flick this listen switch over. If we pop that over and play again, what we're going to hear is what it's actually taking away. So I can hear right away there, it's actually catching the kind of frequencies that I want. So I probably don't really need to play around with this frequency control. But what I do want to do is exaggerate it a bit. I want to actually reduce those frequencies even more than they're being reduced at the moment. So I'm just going to push that depth quite a long way up. And we'll have a listen again to hear again for what it's actually taking out. Okay, you can hear it, especially works on that long s at the end. So let's flip that listen switch over again and have a listen to the vocal with the de-esser on first of all.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay.
Now let's have a listen with it bypassed.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay.
So you can hear it's actually really rounding off that sibilance there. Probably a little bit too much because it sounds a little bit muffled. So I'll bring that depth down there a little bit. Have another listen.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay.
Okay, I could play with that for hours, but that's roughly in the ballpark there. So moving on to this next section, which is called compand. So this is a combination of a compressor and an expander, and it has very few controls, so it's therefore very easy to use. You just have to use your ears mostly. Now, you may be asking, well, what's an expander? You may not have used them before. Indeed, you may be asking, what is a compressor? Let's have a very quick explanation of what a compressor is. A compressor attempts to reduce the dynamic range of a signal. So what does that mean? The dynamic range is the range between the quietest part and the loudest part of the signal. And what a compressor does is it takes the loudest parts, wherever you decide to cut them down, and it cuts them down. And then because you've reduced that dynamic range, you've sort of shrunk it down like that, you can now push the whole thing up and make it louder, which means you can make the quieter parts louder by making the louder parts quieter. If you didn't understand that, I highly recommend rewinding and watching those last few seconds. Again, let me know how many times you had to watch it before you got it. Hopefully I can explain that better in another video. Now, an expander is the opposite of that. An expander, once the signal reaches a certain threshold, then the expander actually increases that signal rather than reducing it. Now, I must admit, I do not use expanders very much at all on vocals, so I'm probably just going to show you that it's here. Not use it too much at all, but you should know it's there. The controls for both the compressor and the expander are the same. In fact, they both use a threshold, so that's the point at which the effect will kick in. They both use a ratio. Now, a ratio is a complicated way of saying how much are we going to change that signal. So in the case of a compressor, once it goes over the threshold, how much are we going to reduce that signal? The attack is how quickly are we going to do that? And that the attack is a shared control for both the expander and the compressor in the case of this plugin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the vocal. I'm going to play it with the music in the background because I always feel you should do that when you're compressing a vocal, so that you can hear the context that you're doing it in. And I'm just going to muck around with some of these controls and try and give a little bit more presence to this vocal.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the morning and you've gone away. That's what we do. Oh, we've come so far. Oh, how come I've never ever felt so far away from you?
Okay, so that is the compan, so the compressor expander. We'll move on now to the equalizer here. It's called a tube equalizer for a specific reason. We'll switch that on and we'll start off with the equalizer part of it. So it's essentially just a 3-band equalizer, a low, a mid and a high band equalizer. If we start off with the low, I'll just change the level of it there. It's really what I would call a low shelf, and that enables you to cut out some of the lower frequencies. You can adjust where it kicks in using this frequency control. And that's the same for all of these bands. You've got a frequency and a level control. So for the top end, I'll just pop that up there. That's what I would call a sort of a high shelf, and I will just bring the frequency back a little bit, and that's really useful for when you want to add a little bit of sparkle or breathiness to a vocal. And then you have a middle band where you could select a particular band in the middle and either increase or decrease it. So I'm just going to have a quick play around with this vocal. I'm going to get rid of some of the muddiness at the bottom of it and add a little bit of breathiness to it, much like I've already got it set up, but I'll listen to it to make sure it sounds good.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the morning and you've gone away. That's what we do. Oh, you've come so far. Oh, how come I've never ever felt so far away from you?
Okay, I'd probably play around a lot more with that in an actual mix, but you get the gist. So a very, very useful equalizer indeed. But here's the little added bonus to it, because you can actually add saturation, not just overall to the signal there, but to specific bands. So if you wanted to add some saturation to, say, these top 2 bands, then you just flick the switch over there for those 2 bands, and then you can use the level control there to add saturation in. So a really nice addition to that equalizer there. Now let's move on to what's down here, the doubler. Now a vocal doubler is a very useful tool indeed, and it's really good for making vocals sound really, really wide. And I like to add it and have it increase during choruses and that type of things in songs, just to make them sound larger than life, depending on the song, of course. Now it has only just a couple of controls. That is a presence control and a stereo control. So if I switch it on, you'll see the UI change over there. You can see that the presence control increases basically the volume of those additional signals. I probably didn't explain that a doubler takes the original signal and it creates 2 duplicate signals for the left and right channels. So the presence control is controlling how loud those additional signals are, and then the stereo control here just controls how wide they are. It's a sort of a pan control for each of those duplications. So let's have a listen again to that vocal. I'm going to solo it this time so you can really clearly hear what it's doing, and have a listen now.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the morning and you've gone away. That's what we do.
Okay, so you can basically hear what it's doing there. I'd like to use it fairly subtly. As I say, it's a really good one to actually automate this one. I'm not going to go into automation now, but essentially I would virtually have it switched off, say, for verses, and then have it kick in during choruses. So good for automation there. Now, moving on to the last section here, which is delay. I'll switch the delay on. So a delay is a very commonly used effect on vocals, both delay and reverb, which I'll talk about in a moment. And what I really want to add to this vocal is a really quick sort of almost a slap, what you call a slap back delay. So I'm going to switch the doubler off because that's a little bit distracting when we're trying to do this. I'm going to solo the vocal again, and I'm going to try and add a very short delay. So it's almost like it's just coming back at you once, very, very quickly. That's what I'm going for.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the morning and you've gone away. That's what we do.
I can control the level of it here.
Oh, you've come so far.
Okay, and then we also have a filter on the end there, so you can control, where you can sort of filter out parts of that delay. So I just want to have it really on the sort of top end. I'll I think. So let's just muck around with that filter control there. So I'm cutting out, so it's not adding delay to the whole signal, it's just to particular frequency ranges. And I'll have a listen again.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the
Okay, that'll do for now. I'll add that doubler back on, and this is starting to sound really, really big, this vocal here. Let's have a listen, and I'm probably gone a little bit overboard, so I'm just going to adjust a little bit.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the morning and you've gone away.
Listen in the mix.
That's what we do. Oh, we've come so far. Oh, how come I've never ever felt so far away from you?
Okay, so you do not have to have these sort of effects in the order that they come in there, in the order that I've gone through there. You can actually change them down here. There's basically an icon for each part of the plugin there, and you can just grab an icon for, say, the de-esser there and drag it to a different position, and that can make a bit of difference to what you're doing, so it's important. But I'd suggest that the default position is not a bad start. Of course, as I mentioned, you do have saturation over here on the way out as well, and it operates in just the same way as the saturation on the input signal. Now, the only thing I would say is missing from this, and it's by no means a criticism, because let's face it, you get this amazing vocal strip for free with Cakewalk by Bandlab, but I would say the thing that we commonly, of course, do to vocals is add reverb as well. So I already do have a reverb, I should say, not reverb, I've been told off for this. I already do have a reverb added to a bus, my DAW here, so I'll unmute that now so that we can hear it. And let's have a listen to this vocal in the context of the music again, with all of those things done on the vocal strip.
You've taken my heart and you give it up. I'm trying to figure out how to fill your cup. Oh, that's what we do. You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the morning and you've gone away. That's what we do. Oh, we've come so far.
Moving on, we're going to be taking a look at the PX64 percussion strip plugin. So this is a plugin which is very, very useful for drums and percussion, that kind of thing. Now, thankfully, in terms of your sanity and the length of this video, it has an awful lot in common with the vocal strip plugin. So we won't be covering the whole thing, just what is unique about this particular strip. Now, I have got a little demo prepared, and it's this little drum groove. Now, rather than try and use this on the whole drum kit, I wouldn't recommend you do that. I have it applied to a couple of individual drums, namely the kick and the snare drum. So let's bring up the plugin a bit bigger so you can see it. And we're going to be starting off by having a listen to the kick drum. Now, as I say, it's got an awful lot in common with the vocal strip, so I won't be going through everything. The things that it has in common is saturation on the input and on the output. Just the same as the vocal strip, you can change the order of the sections over here using the icons. You have a delay section, which is very, very similar to the vocal delay, so I won't be running through that. You have a compressor and expander. Now, they're separated on this, and you only have controls for threshold and ratio. You don't have an attack control. I guess that they are considering that you're always going to use the same sort of attack settings for drums. You may or may not disagree with that. And then we have an equalizer section. Now that is quite different. So let's start there. The equalizer section here, in actual fact, has 4 frequencies where the vocal strip had 3. And you can make some changes to the types of bands that you have. So if we start off with the lowest band here at the bottom, as well as using it in the same way that we could with the vocal strip as kind of a low shelf, we can actually switch over and make it a cut, so we can actually cut all the bottom end out of this kick drum. So let's have a listen to that. Not particularly useful for this kick drum, but it may be useful on another drum where you just want to get rid of any muddiness at the bottom. And the same with the top end of this, where you would start off by default with a sort of a shelf. You can actually switch that to a cut there. So if you wanted to get rid of the top end of those drums, you could using that cut control. Now, you could also have your other middle two frequencies, which I'll play around with a little bit there so you can see them on the graph. And what you can do with those is switch from a vintage to a classic style, and all that really does is you'll see is it changes the shape of that curve. It sort of flattens it out and it creates a little spike just at the point where you're setting that frequency. So that is the difference with the equalizer there. I'm not going to be applying it to the drums at the moment. Now, the biggest thing that you're going to find is different, and it's very appropriate, is that this has a shaper section to it, and I think the shaper section in this particular plugin is very, very easy to use and cool indeed. So this is where we can shape some characteristics of the sound, hence the name shaper. So let's have a listen to begin with to this kick drum, and you'll notice there's quite a ring to that kick drum. And that's happening, if you like, on the tail end of that sound. So I'm going to use this decay setting here, and you can see as I bring it down, it actually lowers the tail end right down. I'm going to take it all the way down, and let's have a listen and see if you can hear any ring on that kick drum. Nope, it's completely gone. If we wanted to make it really ringy, let's put it all the way up. Sounds like a big marching band bass drum now. So that's a really good thing if you want to control that ringiness that you can get on drums sometimes. So I'm going to leave that all the way down there. Actually, I rather like that. Then we have this weight control here. This is really cool because this really controls how heavy that drum is sounding. So I'm going to play the kick again and have a listen as I bring the weight from all the way down to all the way up. So you can hear that real thud there. Again, I'm just going to leave it like that. It's very extreme, but I kind of like it. And then there's the attack. Now, this is where the section which really works on the transient, that initial hit that you get with a drum. And this is very useful if you want to add punchiness or just soften off that drum. So let's see what happens when I start off with a slow attack. So this is going to make the transients really come in slowly. It's going to make the drum sound much softer. And then I'm going to increase it to fast. Let's have a listen. Very extreme there. You can see that transient at the beginning is really being pumped there. So this is a really good way for completely changing the sound of that kick. If I now bypass that shaper and I'll play the kick and then I'll switch it back on, you'll hear a massive difference. So an awful lot of fun can be had with this strip. So I'm going to leave that kick drum as it is, and I'm going to play the whole groove again. But this time I'm going to muck around on the snare drum, where I've also got this percussion strip installed, and I'll just play the whole track. And just to play it out, I'm going to have a go at making this snare drum sound really kind of snappy. So last but, well, indeed least, in my opinion, is the TL64 tube leveler plugin. Now, I'm really just mentioning this plugin because it's there, you've enabled it, it's free to use, so why not? But there's many plugins which approach this problem of how do we get the sort of characteristics that we used to get from old analog gear, particularly when they had vacuum tubes in them. And this is another plugin along those lines. It attempts to add the sort sort of color that we used to get from that old analog equipment. So I've just actually put this on the master bus of my little demo song with my piano and vocals, and I will go through some of the presets in a moment just so you can quickly hear if you hear a difference. Now I will mention a couple of things quickly. I want to point out that at the beginning there is this drive control. And that basically controls how much of the signal is being driven and how much effect the tubes are going to have on that signal. Do make sure that when you push that drive control up, that you also compensate by bringing the output gain down. Otherwise, what happens is you do increase just the volume of the signal, and to human beings, when things get louder, they just sound better. So you might fool yourself into thinking it sounds better when in actual fact it doesn't. So that's an important thing, and they do that in the presets. So I'm just going to quickly go to this first preset, which is to make the mix warmer, and I will play the song with and without. So I'm going to start off without this plugin switched on.
You've taken my heart and you give it up. I'm trying to figure out how to fill your cup. That's what we do.
Now switched on.
You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the morning and you've gone away.
Now, certainly to my ears, it does add a little something, a little more depth in there. So that's kind of cool. Now, another control I just want to point out in this particular plugin is a really interesting one, and this is this dynamic response control here. So basically what happens with vacuum tubes is they actually do not react to the signal consistently. Over time they react differently. So what they've tried to do there is emulate that, and they give you this ability to switch on that dynamics control. Now you may or may not hear the difference. If it's there, it's very, very subtle indeed. But it is there, and I kind of appreciate the effort they've gone to do that. As well as this sort of control here to control the frequencies, particularly in the bass end, because they can start to sound a little bit nasty when you add this kind of effect. So you do have the compensation there, and you can use it very creatively there on the bass end, which they have on that particular plugin that I've played there. I'll switch over to another plugin. This one is called Warm One. I'll just play that and have a listen again. First switched off.
You've taken my heart and you give it up.
And on.
Trying to figure out how to fill your cup. That's what we
Off.
do. You're always telling me that you're here to stay. I wake up in the morning and you've gone away.
And on.
That's what we do.
So as I say, a very, very brief overview there of the TL64 tube leveler, which comes hidden with Cakewalk by Bandlab.
So I do hope that you enjoyed this video and that you can make use of these three plugins. Let me know in the comments down below which of these three you think would be most useful to you. And if you already knew they were there, then be smug about it and tell us down in the comments down below, and you can feel really good about yourself. Now, if you like this video, then please do hit the like button. If you didn't like this video, then hit the dislike button twice. If you like this kind of content, then please do subscribe. Ring the bell on YouTube so that you get to hear about my future videos. Thank you so much for all of your support, and I do hope to see you in the next video.